When the Russian government announced to the world that they were withdrawing from Kherson, no one took them seriously. Everyone thought it was an attempt at a disinformation campaign. After all, the Ukrainians had done the same thing just a few months before when they announced their Kherson initiative, but struck north by Kharkiv with the bulk of their army. While optimistic Ukrainian leaders and the world figured that Russia was still digging in for a long fight, but to everyone's surprise, they actually left. But why would withdrawing from Kherson benefit Russia? Before understanding how it would benefit Russia, it's essential to understand just how big of a deal Kherson was to the Russians. Before the war, Kherson was home to several 100,000 people and was the only regional capital to fall to the invaders. Being the biggest city under Russian occupation, Kherson served as a symbol of the new administration. The Russian army had decided to make Kherson into a fortress. Over the past several months, Putin and his generals moved the bulk of his forces to Kherson. Reliable estimates placed the number of troops in the Kherson Oblast at 40,000, while the attacking Ukrainian army could muster just 23,000 soldiers. These 40,000 troops also included some of the best remaining units left in the Russian army, like the remaining paratroopers and the air assault brigades. Russian paratroopers had been defending Kherson for the past several months, but slowly and surely Ukrainian forces made their way closer to the city. By the time Russia had announced its withdrawal, Ukraine had surrounded the city on 3 sides and was about 10 kilometers from the city center. With the battle practically inevitable, Russian forces had been forcibly depopulating Kherson over the past several months. Tens of thousands of civilians were forced to cross the Dnipro River into Russian captivity. Some children were even forced to relocate to Russia, and Ukrainian men were enlisted into the Russian army at gunpoint. Replacing these civilians were thousands more troops, including tons of recently drafted Russian men who were instantly thrown to battle. All these military preparations and statements Putin made, like Kherson is Russia forever, show just how important the city was to Russia. Abandoning it was no easy choice for Putin, but why he did so was one of the few times Putin favored a military objective over a political one. Crossing rivers is one of the most dangerous things an army can do. Often troops get bunched up on one side as weight restrictions limit the number of people and vehicles crossing at one time. These large concentrations of troops are vulnerable to artillery, rocket, and airstrikes. The Dnipro River is the main physical feature of the area, and it is a massive river that flows from southwestern Ukraine into the heart of the country. Any fight over Kherson would involve having to get troops and material across that river reliably. As previous operations have shown, Russia is notoriously bad at river crossing operations. Back in May near Kharkiv, Russia repeatedly tried to force a river crossing of the Seversky Donets River. Here, Russian forces were trying to outflank Ukrainian defenders around Kharkiv. Crossing the river meant that they could encircle and bypass strong defensive positions on the southern flank of Kharkiv. However, Ukrainian drone strikes and merciless artillery barrages stopped the operation in its tracks. For weeks, Russian forces tried to cross the river with no success. Ukraine kept destroying each pontoon bridge Russian engineers built, and Ukrainian forces decimated troop formations waiting to cross. Because of this painful memory, it was clear to Russian commanders that crossing rivers under fire was not something their army could do well. As Ukrainian troops inched closer to the city center, they could move their artillery and rocket batteries into better firing positions on Kherson and its river crossings. Among these weapons is the infamous American HIMARS system. With the capability to fire a rocket up to 45 miles away, the HIMARS system is deadly accurate and powerful. The Russians in Kherson clearly feared its devastating fire. In the months leading up to the Russian retreat, satellite images revealed that the Kherson International Airport was still a bustling base. Helicopters, tanks, and armored vehicles filled the runway. However, as Ukrainian forces made their way closer to the city, Russia pulled its equipment, moving it further away from the airport and closer to the Dnipro River or across it. Russia attempted to use the infamous Antonivsky Bridge to resupply its forces. The Antonivsky Bridge is the main artery that connects Kherson to the other side of the Dnipro River. Though out of range of Ukrainian strikes before, Ukrainian artillery forces used the deadly accurate HIMARS to make the bridge unusable. While the HIMARS rockets are not strong enough to take down a bridge of that size, they were able to blow up the roads on the bridge because of how accurate it was. After HIMARS destroyed the roads over the bridge, Russian troops decided to use another supply route further north. Spanning across Kakhovka Dam, this was Russia's second attempt at resupplying forces by land. However, HIMARS strikes once again blew up the road. It's important to note here that the strikes only destroyed the road on top of the dam, not the dam itself, as Russian media reported. With the 2 major river crossings knocked out, Russian engineers tried to build a pontoon bridge to ferry troops and equipment across. Ukrainian forces put this crossing under a murderous barrage of artillery and rocket fire day and night. After knocking out the pontoon bridge, the Russians gave up trying to build a major supply route across the Dnipro River. But even if Russia could resupply its troops, they faced another enemy, the weather. Ukraine gets notoriously cold. With temperatures often dropping into the single digits or below freezing, combined with snow and wind chill, Ukraine becomes a soldier's worst enemy in the winter. Because Russia has constantly been attacking the nation's infrastructure, few houses here likely had running water, gas, or electricity. Trying to motivate soldiers to fight in the dark, cold homes on city blocks where they could not see anything is something Russian generals thought was too much to ask. Another motivation factor was that the troops in Kherson were demoralized and defeated mentally. Most units bottled up in Kherson had never been in constant combat for 9 months. After Putin started mobilizing reservists, the first troops brought into service went straight to Kherson. But it was not only high casualties that broke down unit cohesion that was concerning for Russian forces, it was Ukrainian partisans. Kherson is noted to have one of the most active partisan movements in all the occupied regions of Ukraine. Ukrainian citizens quickly made their dislike of Russian occupation known early on in the war. They openly defied Russian troops within days when they assembled in the city center and carried Ukrainian flags. Since then, the resistance movement has grown. Partisans in Kherson regularly carried out attacks, and no one was safe. Ukrainian collaborators and Russian service members were targeted with near impunity. Partisans conducted a series of car bombings throughout the summer and early fall against pro-Russian officials. They also assassinated others with mobile hit squads. Partisans also ran their own psychological warfare campaign by constantly putting up anti-Russian flyers that threatened death to Russian soldiers and rewards for destroying Russian equipment. Partisan farmers also resisted the Russian administration by refusing to harvest wheat. Because wheat is one of the country's main cash crops, the locals in Kherson did not want to feed or aid the Russian war machine in any way. But Kherson partisans not only conducted covert hits on Russian collaborators, they directly aided the Ukrainian military. As the regular army got closer to Kherson, partisans were quite active in helping identify targets for the Ukrainian artillery and airstrikes. In one famous example, partisans gave the army the coordinates of a Russian base. Soon afterward, a Ukrainian artillery barrage leveled it, killing up to 200 soldiers and 2 high-ranking officers. The partisan problem in Kherson was so bad that Russia admitted it in a rare public admission. The Russian government had to divert troops away from the front line to carry out counter-insurgent operations. Federal police officers from the St. Petersburg area and Spetsnaz operatives were also brought in to quash the partisans. All these efforts failed. Even as late as 5 days before the Russian withdrawal, Ukrainian collaborators were still dying under mysterious circumstances. On November 6, the deputy head of Kherson Oblast died in a car accident. However, many suspect he fell victim to yet another partisan car bombing. Even with all of Russia's best efforts at keeping the partisan problem under wraps, it clearly had no hope of keeping the situation under control. Pulling out of Kherson rid them with having to deal with fighting a regular army and an insurgent army who showed no signs of stopping. Pulling out of Kherson also had operational benefits. It seems that Russia is shifting back to the east and south for its own major offensive. Over the past several weeks, Russian forces have launched a ferocious counterattack against Bakhmut. The town of Bakhmut lies in the middle of a major crossroads, and taking control of that city denies Russia the use of highways for faster troop movement and resupply. In the Zaporizhia region, Russian forces have recently launched a series of minor offensives that have made some gains. However, outside observers have noted that despite the massive disparity in numbers, the Russians are making dumb tactical errors. For example, they're not allowing newly mobilized troops to acclimate or train. Instead, these soldiers are thrown directly into combat. Why seasoned military officers would do such things in recent weeks only makes sense politically. After Russia's new Supreme Ukraine commander took over, he was very adamant that Kherson be abandoned. However, as we stated earlier, evacuating Kherson was a huge political pill for Putin to swallow. Western and Ukrainian intelligence believe that Putin only allowed Russian commanders to pull out of Kherson with the promise of a renewed offensive in the east and south. With this understanding, the haphazard attacks in those areas make sense because these same commanders wanted to show Putin they were making a good faith effort for that promise. Because of this, Russian generals will likely try to quickly transfer the tens of thousands of troops evacuated east to the new front. Though many people have speculated that Putin did this as a good faith measure toward negotiations, this is unlikely. For their part, Ukraine has explicitly said it will continue its offensive. Stopping now would only benefit Russia. Putin and his cronies understand the Ukrainian position and know that a ceasefire is now even less likely than before. Instead, Putin might have wanted the evacuation from Kherson as a reason for general mobilization. Western observers noted that for the longest time, Putin wanted to mobilize his country to fight the war when it was clear that Ukraine would not lay over and submit to Russia. However, his cronies advised against this, since they still wanted to keep up the facade that the special military operation was a limited war. It was not until Ukraine's lightning blitz in the northeast that Putin was forced to mobilize 300,000 Russians to shore up its lines. Hardliners in the Russian media and political circles are already calling for general mobilization. Putin likely still desires this route since it will best guarantee his victory, though he may not do it right away. Pulling out of Kherson gives him the justification needed to bring the rest of the country into this war. Now watch why Putin's invasion of Ukraine is a failure, or check out insane ways Vladimir Putin survived assassination attempts.